Stroads. The Stroad is urban planning's greatest self-creation, a street-road hybrid that spectacularly fails at being either. Picture a 6-lane roadway wide enough for highway speeds, but punctuated with traffic lights every few hundred feet, and driveways cutting across every block. That's your local Stroad, probably right outside the nearest Walmart. Research shows over 40% of pedestrian vehicle accidents happen on these monstrosities, with 97% of fatal pedestrian crash hotspots occurring on multi-lane roadways. The problem is fundamental. Stroads try to move cars quickly while providing access to businesses, achieving neither goal. Traffic crawls from light to light, while drivers navigate constant stopping, merging, and driveway conflicts. Pedestrians attempting to cross face 6 or more lanes of semi-highway traffic with inadequate signaling. Emergency vehicles get trapped in the same congestion as everyone else. Orlando's International Drive exemplifies peak Stroad dysfunction, more pedestrian deaths per mile than almost anywhere in America. Cities built these thinking they'd get highway efficiency with local access. Instead, they created expensive, dangerous corridors that cost millions to maintain while being hostile to everyone. Parking craters. Downtown used to have buildings. Now it has asphalt deserts. Buffalo demolished 40% of its downtown structures between 1950 and 2000 to create parking lots. That's not urban renewal, that's urban demolition. These craters destroy precisely what makes cities function: walkable streetscapes where people can move between destinations without driving. Parking craters disrupt connectivity and walkability while inducing automobile congestion. Detroit built enough downtown parking to accommodate twice its population, then wondered why nobody visited anymore. The economics are absurd. Cities tear down tax-generating buildings to create surface lots that produce minimal revenue. Hartford lost millions in annual tax dollars by converting prime real estate into parking. You can't window shop at a parking lot. You can't grab coffee between errands when every block is interrupted by empty asphalt. The crater creates dead zones where thriving communities once existed, forcing remaining businesses to survive in isolation. Most downtown areas now have more parking spaces than cars, meaning we demolished functioning neighborhoods for storage we didn't need. The parking crater represents peak car brain thinking. Destroy the destination to make room for the vehicle. Car-dependent suburbs. Welcome to the American dream, where you're required to spend $9,000 annually just to participate in society. Phoenix sprawls across 500 square miles with population density so pathetically low that efficient transit becomes mathematically impossible. Research shows suburban residents experience 47% higher depression rates compared to walkable urban neighborhoods. Turns out isolation isn't actually good for mental health. Suburban dwellers walk 39% less than urban residents, contributing directly to elevated obesity and cardiovascular disease. Children can't bike to school because sidewalks don't exist. Elderly residents become literal prisoners once they lose driving ability. The suburb promises freedom, but delivers a car dependency trap where every single activity, getting milk, haircuts, seeing friends, requires vehicle ownership. Parents become unpaid Uber drivers shuttling kids around because independent mobility is impossible. Studies confirm that when people rely on cars for over 50% of activities, life satisfaction measurably declines. The infrastructure costs are equally absurd. Those wide streets, sprawling water pipes, and endless power lines cost 3 times more per resident than dense neighborhoods. Suburban design assumes infinite cheap gasoline and perfect health until age 80. When either assumption fails, the entire system collapses. Dead plazas. A dead plaza is what happens when designers confuse big with good. Boston City Hall Plaza covers 11 acres of windswept concrete and feels empty even during events. The underlying mistake is treating public space as empty sculpture garden instead of everyday living room. Successful squares like Italian piazzas work because they are tightly framed by shops, cafes, residences, and services. People cross them on the way to something useful, then stay because there is food, shade, seating, and other humans. Dead plazas flip that logic. Too much open space, too few doors, no active ground floors, and no fine-grained edges. The result is a place that feels unsafe when empty and uncomfortable when full. Designers chase abstract civic grandeur while ignoring basic human behavior. People cluster near activity, corners, and edges, not in the middle of barren concrete airfields. These spaces represent the triumph of architectural theory over actual use. Planners read about grand civic spaces in textbooks, but forgot those spaces worked because they were surrounded by commerce and daily life, not isolated as monuments to modernist aesthetics. Highway cuts. Interstate construction physically erased entire neighborhoods, not metaphorically, literally. In less than 2 decades, highway projects displaced 475,000 households and over 1 million people. Washington, D.C.'s interstates 395 and 695 obliterated 23,500 residents, destroyed 1,400 housing units, and eliminated $1.4 billion in home value. The placement was never random. Planners consistently routed highways through black and brown communities, while wealthy neighborhoods received bypass routes. St. Paul's Interstate 94 construction displaced 600 families and 300 businesses, almost entirely within the African American community. These concrete barriers don't just separate geography, they sever social networks, isolate residents from employment and services, and create permanent noise and pollution corridors. San Francisco eventually demolished the highly criticized Embarcadero Freeway after it was damaged in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake and watched property values increase by $3 billion, proving that highways actively suppressed economic activity. The cuts represent a choice: prioritize suburban commuters passing through over residents actually living there. Urban highways created lasting scars that still define American cities decades later, with measurable impacts on connectivity and community cohesion. Drive-throughs. Drive-throughs reconfigured entire streetscapes to serve car windows instead of people. The average McDonald's drive-through consumes more land than the restaurant building itself, wrapping around structures like a moat that isolates businesses from pedestrian activity. Buildings literally turn their backs to sidewalks, orienting storefronts toward idling cars instead. Pedestrians attempting to walk past experience hostile territory. Wide driveways cutting across sidewalks, vehicles approaching from multiple angles, and zero reason for the business to acknowledge their existence. The drive-through bank, drive-through pharmacy, drive-through funeral home. We design cities where exiting your vehicle becomes optional. This optimization for speed eliminates spontaneous human encounters that create neighborhood vitality. You collect coffee without seeing another face or having unplanned conversations. What was once a building's front entrance becomes a service door while the real action faces the parking lot. Drive-through lanes increase emissions from idling vehicles and create distracted driving risks as customers navigate ordering, payment, and merging simultaneously. Cities embrace this design thinking it served convenience, but actually built environments where community interaction is systematically prevented. Cul-de-sacs. The cul-de-sac promises suburban tranquility, but delivers a car-dependent maze where emergency vehicles struggle to navigate. Fire trucks face tight turning circles and confusing dead-end layouts. Ambulances get lost in subdivisions designed like defensive labyrinths. Despite marketing around child safety, studies link cul-de-sac neighborhoods to higher childhood obesity rates because kids cannot walk anywhere independently. Every destination requires entering high-speed arterial roads, making autonomous mobility impossible for children and non-drivers. The design creates a street hierarchy: quiet dead ends, feeding into busy collectors, which feed into dangerous arterials. Residents become trapped in infrastructure that grows increasingly hostile with each level. The elderly lose independence when they stop driving because walking to destinations becomes genuinely dangerous. Emergency response times measurably increase as vehicles must navigate the maze. Snowplows and garbage trucks struggle with the geometry. The peace and quiet comes at a steep price: isolation, car dependency, and a built environment that punishes anyone without a functioning vehicle. The cul-de-sac represents suburban planning's central contradiction: designing for vehicles while claiming to prioritize people. One-way streets. One-way streets transform downtowns into confusing highway on-ramps where drivers become pinballs bouncing through the city. You overshoot your destination by 3 blocks and spend 10 minutes navigating back. Louisville spent $40 million converting downtown one-ways back to two-way after discovering they had eliminated street life entirely. The system optimizes vehicle throughput while destroying everything else. Faster traffic makes pedestrian crossings more dangerous. Businesses lose customers who cannot figure out how to reach them or give up trying. Visitors face navigation confusion that discourages exploration. The one-way network creates psychological barriers, signaling places meant for passing through, not stopping. Half of potential customers cannot easily access storefronts, crippling retail viability. Interestingly, context matters significantly. European cities with higher density and shorter blocks experience fewer disruptions from one-way streets. The United States has 2.5 times more roadway length per capita than Europe, with typically wider lanes and larger block sizes. American one-ways turn entire districts into traffic sewers, rather than community centers. Speed increases, but danger rises for everyone outside a car. Downtowns become hostile environments where driving fast matters more than creating places people want to visit. Excessive setback requirements. Zoning codes mandate that buildings sit far back from streets, creating dead zones that kill walkability. The gap between sidewalk and building entrance becomes a no man's land. Too far to feel connected, too close to be useful space. Storefronts lose street presence. Window shopping becomes impossible when you are 20 feet from the glass. The setback destroys the tight street walls that make walking pleasant and safe. Cities created these rules thinking they provided breathing room and green space, but actually built alienating distances that discourage walking. 6 cities attempting to address housing shortages found that excessive setbacks, combined with other regulations, prevented affordable housing development entirely. The regulations encourage single-family development while making townhouses, duplexes, and small apartment buildings illegal to build. Developers cannot economically build smaller, more affordable units when regulations demand massive setbacks, oversized lots, and excessive parking. The setback requirement seems minor on paper, but fundamentally shapes whether neighborhoods become walkable communities or car-dependent sprawl. Wide, multi-lane arterials. Streets wider than 29 feet see pedestrian crashes increase dramatically. These oversized arterials, often 5 or 6 lanes, encourage speeding while creating deadly crossing conditions. The width signals highway to drivers, triggering faster speeds regardless of posted limits. Pedestrians attempting to cross face 60-plus feet of active traffic lanes with inadequate refuge islands or signal timing. The arterial design prioritizes vehicle capacity over every other consideration. Pedestrian safety, cycling infrastructure, transit efficiency, and neighborhood connectivity all disappear. These roads act as barriers slicing communities apart, similar to highways but woven throughout residential areas. Emergency vehicles benefit from width, but everyone else suffers from the hostile environment created. Streets lacking protected bike lanes, signalized crossings, and pedestrian islands become impassable for vulnerable users. The multi-lane arterial represents a fundamental choice in street design. Move cars quickly, or create places where people can safely exist outside vehicles. American cities consistently chose the former, then wondered why pedestrian deaths continued climbing. Subscribe to learn about more nightmare urban planning designs.